Good morning, Carolyn.
Good morning, Ben.
This is Ben Thomas with UST Training. We're going to have a tank savvy talk today. I have the pleasure of meeting with Carolyn Hoskinson, the now former director of the EPA's Office of Underground Storage Tanks. I've known Carolyn for many, many years, and I'm very pleased that she has offered an interview so we can show our readers kind of a national perspective on underground storage tanks. With over a decade of experience. I just want to say thanks, Carolyn, for agreeing to sit down and talk with me today.
Happy to be here.
After many years of service, in fact, Carolyn, I think you're probably the longest serving director of EPA's Office of Underground Storage Tanks ever. I've known directors since '96 or so, and you've been here a long time. Can you maybe just start off by saying like what made you stick around for so long on such a big and sometimes contentious post?
So I would say my number one answer to that question is the community. I have, from the beginning of my involvement with the tanks program, really appreciated the opportunity to get to know people from the regulators at the federal, state, and tribal level, to the owners and operators of the facilities, to the service providers, the equipment manufacturers, the trainers like yourself. It's a wonderful community of people, and it makes it fun to go to work every day when you work with a good group of people. And in addition to that, I would say the community overwhelming is committed to. We have a shared goal. We want the product to stay in the tanks where it belongs. So we might have a few disagreements here and there about the details, but we have a shared goal, and so many people in the community are so committed to that goal and so passionate about it. It's exciting and invigorating to work with such a great community of people. I would also add that I really believe the mission of the Underground Storage Tank Program is so important. There are gas stations in everybody's neighborhood, and we're all thankful for that because we all need it as a product to fill our cars with. And so the environmental aspect of that touches every single community everywhere because there are gas stations everywhere. So the mission is really important to pay attention to that. And the last thing I'll say is, there are new issues all the time. As fuel evolves, as new technologies emerge, there are new things to learn, so it never gets old.
That's awesome, but thanks so much. I know as a former regulator myself, in trying to approach work in kind of a holistic fashion, I agree wholeheartedly with you that we need the alliance of the service providers, the insurance industry, the regulators and whatnot. So kind of dovetailing into that, nationally, the UST program has enjoyed the support of the regulated community, which is perhaps not, common in environmental affairs. I mean, why do you think we all get along so well here? What's your thoughts about that?
I think flexibility is a big reason for that. I think flexibility in the UST program is both a blessing and a curse. Mm-hmm. It provides everybody the opportunity to design their facility in the way that makes sense for them, to choose the equipment that makes sense for them. There's a huge amount of flexibility in the UST regulations. It's also a curse because we can't ever say, here's exactly how everybody does this, because everybody does it differently. But I think flexibility helps make the regulations a more collaborative effort because there are a lot of different ways to comply. Unlike maybe a more rigid regulatory structure where it was like, you must do exactly this thing because I know best and I'm going to tell you what to do. I think the flexibility creates an opportunity for collaboration that helps keep that relationship productive.
Which is funny because the UST regs are very prescriptive, and yet at the same time, they're completely site specific, right? And so you really have to know what you got in the ground so you even know what rules apply. Okay, yeah, that's great. So 14 years, am I getting that right? You've been with us?
14 years.
That's amazing. And so if you were to sit back and say the three best or coolest or proudest achievements I've done in the UST world, nationwide, what would they be, Carolyn?
Well, number one, I would say the thing that has been consistently my highest priority throughout my 14 years was building those relationships and continuing to keep them strong throughout my time. So that's the thing I'm probably above anything else most pleased with how well that's worked all these years. But as far as specific achievements, we've had a lot of change in the tanks program over the time that I've been involved with it. When I started in the program, we were just implementing the Energy Act, and the move to the 3-year inspection frequency and the requirements for secondary containment and operator training, and big shift in the program to accommodate everything that was in the Energy Act. And I think we did hugely successfully at that. And it was a lot of work by a lot of people.
I want to say that probably the lack of lawsuits against the new, I mean, normally when new regs come out, there's this, there's this huge backlash of lawsuits, and they kind of didn't really happen, did they?
Yeah. So
that's one measurement of success, I think.
So over time, right, we had the Energy Act in 2005, and we implemented that primarily first in the states through guidelines from the federal program, and then the states updating their regulations. Then in 2009, we had the Recovery Act, where on the cleanup side of the program, we got an extra $200 million to disperse out to the states and tribes to really get a lot of cleanups done. I think that was a huge success, a huge heavy lift on the cleanup side of the program. But a lot of sites moved forward thanks to that infusion of Recovery Act money. And then most recently, the federal regulations, and then all of the states having to update their regulations. So 3 pretty big chunks of work over the last 14 years. And I think it's all moved us forward in a really positive way.
That's awesome. I mean, I've met tank owners of every stripe and size, from big, national firms to mom and pops and military bases and fleet operations, hospitals, emergency generator tanks. I mean, there's a whole wide universe and diverse universe of underground tank operators out there. It's my opinion that the big organizations that have the resources to manage the risk have in fact gotten there. In other words, by and large, the bigger organizations seem to have a pretty solid handle on operational compliance. The struggle, I think, continues to be all the, what I'll call the mom and pop operators that are out there, single or a couple store owners out there. I mean, if you were to, and I know, unlike previous directors, you like talking to these people, right? And so, I mean, what advice would you give to a small independent owner operator looking forward about, maybe the frustration of the rules or the lack of resource? Any words of advice for the mom and pops out there?
Yeah. So, I mean, I made it a really big part of my priority to fly around the country and meet people and talk to people that own these businesses and are trying to keep up with our regulations and all their requirements. And, there is a lot for a small business owner to keep on top of, right? You have staff people and everything involved with managing staff people. You have the UST regulations, but a lot of other environmental regulations. You have the air program, you have weights and measures, you have the fire marshal, then if you have a convenience store, you have everything associated with your convenience store, tobacco and alcohol and the health department and everything else, credit cards. There's a lot for a small business owner to keep track of. And trying to stay on top at all times of the underground storage tank requirements is just one of, a million things to try to do every day. I think that the advice that I would have is, to the extent that you can build relationships with people who can be your partners in helping you stay on top of compliance, is the only thing I can think of that helps that be more manageable. If you're trying to stay top of it totally by yourself on your own, that's a really high hurdle. But if you can build a relationship with trainers such as yourself who really know what the regulations are and can help you, if you have a relationship with a compliance assistance officer in your community, or even an inspector, most of our inspectors are not evil people that are out there trying to get you. They really would like to educate you about what the requirements are. If you have an ability to join an organization such as a local petroleum marketers association or some organization where you can get that kind of support, so you're not in it on your own and trying to figure.
So what I'm hearing is don't feel like you have to go it alone, kind of thing.
Exactly.
That's great. Exactly. Okay. I've noticed over the years, our viewers may or may not know that federally recognized Indian tribes are subject to federal EPA rules and not state rules, although there's a little bit of blend over there. There seems to be a really much stronger working relationship and goodwill between the tribes and EPA. Could you talk about what that is and maybe how we got there?
So I think it's not revolutionary, but something that maybe people don't always think about. I mean, all of us as human beings, we want to be respected, we want to be involved, we want to be heard. And so the Federal Tanks program has put a really high priority on collaboration, communication, when I could. But back in the olden days when we used to travel pre-COVID, I made it a priority to get out to tribal communities and see where they live and what the surrounding issues are that they're dealing with that impact their ability to deal with tanks issues. Really talk to people, understand their cultural values, and just build that personal relationship. I think, like I said, we all want to know that we're respected and people hear us. And I think that's been key to a really strong relationship between EPA and our tribal partners.
I've been really pleased to see that over the years. There just seems to be this much more of a cohesion amongst, and now there's, national organizations that bring all the tribes together to maybe there's more kind of structural infrastructure in place that allows us to have more contact time.
Yep.
Exactly. I mean, I know, Carolyn, you're a person who, I don't know any other director who's like, here's my cell phone, call me day or night. Let's kind of talk about things. So I want to say I'm thankful for that. I'm a former regulator. I've been explaining underground tank regs for 3 decades now. Kind of like what we were saying earlier, once you get in here, you're kind of in it for the long haul. But I've been doing live stand-up training, shifted to webinars. A lot of it is self-paced, automated now for trainers or maybe even trainees. What sort of observations, advice would you have from kind of a national level? I think operator training makes our world better. Sometimes hard to prove, but what advice would you have for me as a trainer, I guess, is what I'd like to ask.
Well, I think training is essential. And if we could do this interview all day, I'd share all the stories I have about people who weren't trained and things went really badly, and people who were and how things went well. I'm a huge believer in training. I think it's important as a national community to have a combination of online opportunities and in-person opportunities for people to learn. Different people have different learning ways that they learn more effectively. I think online training is really essential in that it makes training more widely available. If you don't have to get in your car and drive somewhere and get to the training location and then drive home or fly even, the ability to turn on your computer and have training readily available to you, I think is super, super important. And I hope it makes it more accessible for people to get trained. But if we can combine that with really helping people understand at a really basic level, here's what equipment I have, what exactly do I need to do with the exact equipment that I have, getting back to the complexity of every gas station is built slightly differently from every other one. So how do I figure out what applies to me, and really incorporating that into the training. The other thing I'll say is that from the very beginning, the EPA's tanks program has been a strong believer in plain language and explaining things in a really straightforward way so that people can understand them. I don't ever want to be accused of speaking government regulatory gobbledygook where people are like, I have no idea what that person's talking about. So we've worked really hard on explaining things clearly, articulating the requirements clearly, so that folks really know what to do. And I think that continues to be vitally important. We have a lot of people who are trying to figure out how to comply. It's a really, really big community. So we should be clear about what we're asking people and what we're trying to teach them.
I'm remembering we did a field trip a couple years ago out to the Spokane Tribes gas station, Spokane, Washington, for the Tribal Lands Environmental Forum. And one thing that really struck me is that you had a bunch of your senior staff there. And this is a modern, fully functional gas station. They got all the good hardware in place, but there are all these little things that kind of weren't working. I was really struck. I remember in particular, Mark Barola was like really frustrated by saying, like, we spent all this time doing this, and like, why is this even still happening? So I just want to kind of put in a pitch for your team, because the folks I know at EPA's headquarters, Office of Underground Storage Tanks, I find them to take their job really seriously. And they also, I think, kind of mirror you and have that wanting to have something provided in plain language that makes sense for people. So, and
it's something we need to constantly work on. What else are people confused about? What else is complicated? So we can keep continuing to improve in that way.
Yeah, I know as a trainer, for me, it's frustrating because I can't talk to everyone personally. And in our training course, we make it really clear, you simply have to know what you have in the ground in order for the rules to make sense. Like, here's a stack of regulations, but if you peel away the stuff that doesn't even apply to you, it's actually not so bad. I spend a lot of time trying to over and over and over again, what do you got, so that when it gets to this particular slide, this slide is like meaningful to me, or I got to kind of listen to it because I got to understand all the regs, but it's not going to be as important as such.
Personally, in my own personal life, I'm a big user of checklists. They work for me, right? Like, what are the 10 things I need to remember to bring on my camping trip? I have a checklist, right? Did I bring all 10 things on my camping trip? I think a lot of people have worked hard to develop tools for UST facilities to have those checklists. How often do I need to do this test? How often do I need to repeat it based on the equipment I have in my situation? And so the more that people can use those kind of tools that are available, I think it'll help them have better compliance rates and more certainty that they're keeping up with what they need to do.
That's awesome. Carolyn, I know you're busy. You're starting a new job soon. You are part of, a lot of founding fathers and mothers of the tanks program from the regulator side are transitioning to other topics. And it's a full-time job for me to keep track of who's replacing who in various state agencies. So there's a whole new crop of young and upcoming UST inspectors and program managers out there. What advice do you have for them about, welcome to the world of underground storage tanks? What would you tell them if you could tell them each individually some advice or some wisdom you've learned over the years?
Couple of key things. One is that the underground storage tank program is vitally important. Like I said at the beginning, the mission is it affects every single community. If there's anybody new to the program who has not yet watched the Check the Waters 60 Minutes program from before we had a UST program,
which really, by the way, is available on my YouTube channel. So if you want to follow up what Carolyn's talking about, coming back to UST training, youtube.com/UST training, you can find a copy of that groundbreaking 1984 60 Minutes episode.
It's a fantastic video. It's worth watching if you're new to the program. Really get a sense for how real live people are affected when we have leaks from our facilities and you're turning on your tap water in your house and petroleum is coming out. The mission is vitally important. I think that's one thing that's really useful for people to know. I also would say that building your network is a really important part of your job. When I was young in my career, I had a boss who said to me, going out to lunch is part of your work time. I want you to find people to build your network with and go out to lunch with them. Oh, okay. And it's continued to be really useful to me to meet people like yourself and people throughout the tanks community and really build those relationships, because you never know when that relationship is going to be really useful. You have a question, you have an issue, and you know who to reach out to talk about with. I think that's a really, really important thing to do.
That's awesome. And so in wrapping up, what's next? You're doing something about recycling?
Yeah, so my new job is I'm the director of the Office of Resource Conservation and Recovery at EPA. We do everything from waste reduction, don't create waste in the first place, to recycling and trying to address the challenges of recycling around the country, to hazardous waste management, to cleaning up problems from hazardous waste contamination. So pretty big portfolio and a couple of exciting new issues for me to learn about.
And I'm going to guess you're going to be carrying over some of the things you've learned in the tanks program over to the recycling waste reduction stream too, huh?
I certainly hope so.
Carolyn, it has been a thrill and a delight and an honor to have worked with you these so many, many years. I really appreciate all the things you've done and the kind of the tone and the attitude you've set for EPA, which I want to think has trickled down to EPA regions in the states as well. So best of luck to you, and let's stay in touch. Let's hear how things are going in your new job.
Thank you so much.
Great. This is Ben Thomas signing off with the former director of EPA's Office of Underground Storage Tanks, Carolyn Hoskinson. Thanks, Carolyn.